Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm Michael Estrada, your host for this podcast today. And thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast. We really appreciate it at the network. And check out other episodes that you haven't been able to witness recently. If you haven't checked out my latest show, I also had that come out. It's coming out on Monday. And you guys should definitely give it a listen. It was a good episode. We talked about a bunch of NBA topics. And if you're a Lakers fan and you're worried about the play-in situation, go check that episode out especially. But this segment's going to be a really fun one. And I say that every time, but I think this one, I think you guys will like, because it's learning to appreciate different styles of play, greatness. And I think it's also just looking at the fact that we're going to look at like just different sleepers too in the Eastern Conference and talk about that a little bit. So on this show, we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about Russell Westbrook, who notched his 181st triple-double of his career, which ties Oscar Robison for the most all time. And he's going to average a triple-double in 4 out of his last 5 seasons. So we're going to break that down on this segment. Later on, we're going to talk about the Knicks and Clippers game, some takeaways I took away from that. We're going to talk about who's a bigger threat in the East, the Miami Heat or the Boston Celtics, as they played a game yesterday and are playing on Tuesday. And then the last thing I'm going to do is break down my top 5 point guards in the NBA. So this will be a really fun segment. And by the way, when I do all these rankings and everything like that, it all comes down to I want you guys to so appreciate how great the point guards are, and even just guys who maybe aren't on that list. There are some really great point guards that aren't on that list that should be definitely appreciated. So, Russell Westbrook, right? Russell Westbrook, for me, is the 6th best point guard in the NBA. And I'm talking about this season, right? Russell Westbrook, for his career, has always been around a top 5, top 3 point guard, depending on the season. But the thing with Russell Westbrook this year is he's really turned it around the second half of the year, right? And he's played much better basketball. The team's played much better basketball. I mean, the Wizards have been one of the best teams in basketball recently in terms of how they've played. And it's not because they're playing exceptional defense, because that's one thing they're not doing. They are playing terrible defense. But their offense is really scary with him and Bradley Beal, because Bradley Beal averages 31.4 points a game. And then you got Russell Westbrook, who's averaging 22, 11.5 and 11.4 assists. And then you also got, Rui Hachimura. I mean, this team has been, buying in and really playing much better basketball. But in their recent win against Indiana, which was a 134-133 overtime win, Russell Westbrook tied Oscar Robison for the most triple-doubles of all time at 181. And it's amazing, right? People sit there and here are the criticisms when it comes to Russell Westbrook, right? And there's been other people on the show who have talked about appreciating Russell Westbrook a little bit more, because you're not going to always have the opportunity to have him in the game and see a guy like this again. And the reason why I'm bringing up Russell Westbrook for you guys now is simply because what Russell Westbrook does, a lot of other people are never going to be able to do. People say, oh, it's stat padding. Oh, he only cares about his personal stats and not about team winning. Do you realize how hard it is to get a triple-double? Even if you tried your hardest, even if you did everything you can, as a point guard, getting a triple-double every night is unprecedented. Now, I heard some I heard some commentators on ESPN yesterday talking about how Russell Westbrook should be in the MVP talk. That's a little outlandish. I think he's obviously really good, but the thing is, Russell Westbrook is not going to be in the MVP conversation. And that's not necessarily because he's playing bad basketball, but it's just because his team's ninth in the Eastern Conference. If they had played like they are now the entire season, they could have been a top 6-5 team in the Eastern Conference. Maybe higher, honestly. And I think they're one of the more dangerous teams if they get in the play-in. Like, if they somehow get the 8th spot, they could totally beat Boston in the first round. And because look, their problem is they don't play any defense, right? But the reason why Russell Westbrook needs to be appreciated is because the Wizards have finally bought into what Russell Westbrook is, right? And Russell Westbrook, like I said before, has averaged a triple-double in 4 out of the last 5 seasons. Oscar Robison did that once. And people can say, oh, it's stat padding, right? Like I said before. It's so hard to do that, especially as a point guard, because you have to be so relentless on the glass. You have to be so keen in getting your guys involved. And then Russell Westbrook also puts up a lot of points. So you have to, and again, he's not like on the most talented team of all time. Now, Bradley Beal is an unreal player and will be a second-team All-NBA type of guy, most likely. But the rest of that team is not really any stars. Rui Hachimura is a good player, and Robin Lopez is not a bad player, and Alex Len is not a bad player, but they're not all-star level talent guys. Rui Hachimura maybe later on in the career if he starts to get more consistent. But again, if you look at this team, right, they're not like exceptionally talented. It's not like the teams he had in OKC when he had him, Paul George, and Carmelo, or Kevin Durant, or even when he was in Houston, right? I mean, he didn't average a triple-double in Houston, but he was pretty close to it. So the thing is, what he's doing is unprecedented, right? And look, I've been a guy who says that Russell Westbrook is not necessarily a guy that you can win a championship around. I've said that. Because it's not because of what he doesn't bring from a leadership perspective, an intensity perspective, and trying to win every night. It's the fact that he's just very inefficient. That's his biggest issue. He's just a very inefficient scorer. With all that being said, it's important to recognize that Russell Westbrook does deserve our praise and our gratitude for what he's given to the game. He is by far the hardest playing guy in the NBA. By far the hardest guy playing in the NBA. I mean, do you see the intensity this guy plays with every night? I mean, it's not even close. The guy plays an intensity few guys play with in the league. I wouldn't say, like, there's really not many guys that do. In terms of every game, every minute, this guy's coming at you full force, right? You could say, oh, Jokic plays really hard. Yeah, but no one plays with the intensity and the relentless nature of Westbrook. Now, that also is why he shoots inefficiently a lot of the time. But, again, you have to appreciate Westbrook. Again, and there are people who've criticized him, right? Like, for example, Stephen A. Smith said, I love the way he plays, but he's got to win. Okay, that's fair, right? But Russell Westbrook has now started to win games, right? He's gotten the Wizards now in position where they're not very far behind the Charlotte Hornets right now to get that 8th spot. Looking at the standings right now, I think going into last night, they were a game and a half back. And right now, I believe they probably are they're only a game back of the Charlotte Hornets right now for the 8th spot. Only a game back. And let's see the Wizards play next, right? The Wizards play the Hawks twice, the Cavaliers, and the Hornets. They can win. They could get one game from the Hawks, and then they should beat the Cavs, and they can beat the Hornets. Again, they could be the 8th spot, and I think that if they're getting the 8th spot, Boston could be in a load of trouble. Boston could be in a load of trouble, and I'm saying that right now. Boston could be in a load of trouble. Because, look, the Wizards don't play legitimate defense. I mean, I'm looking at their last 4 games, obviously, and this is a credit. I mean, Westbrook's not, for his intensity and everything he does bring to the game, he's not a great defender. And at this age of his career, he used to be pretty good, but he's decent now. He's not bad, but he's not exceptional. I mean, they allowed 141 points to the Pacers on May 3rd. Then on May 5th, they allowed 135 points to the Bucks. Then 129 to the Raptors. Then 132 against the Pacers. again, they're not a defensive team, but they can score. They play a very fast-paced game. They have, I think, the fastest pace in the league. And that's primarily because of Westbrook, right? He has revolutionized basketball because of the triple-double, right? He's made it valuable to get triple-doubles every night. And unfortunately, a lot of people are taking his greatness for granted because they're saying, oh, well, he doesn't win. And look, I'm one of those same people that says he is an unreal talent. And look, him being the sixth best point guard this season is primarily just because the other guys ahead of him have produced more winning consistently. Westbrook has proven to win games now, but it hasn't been consistent over the entire season. From a talent standpoint, I mean, again, if Westbrook gets in the playoffs and makes some noise, you may have to have a different conversation. But I look at consistent winning, and unfortunately, that's probably why he's not in the list. However, Westbrook is going to be, a top 5 to top 10 point guard ever play in the game. 100%. What he's done, he's revolutionized basketball. And people need to appreciate it, because how many point guards are you going to see in the future that are going to be able to do what this guy does on a consistently great basis in terms of getting triple-doubles? I'm not sure we're ever going to see a guy like this again. Because Luca Doncic, for example, gets triple-doubles, but he doesn't average it, right? LeBron James has gotten triple-doubles. He doesn't average it. James Harden's gotten many triple-doubles, right? But he doesn't average a triple-double. Right? And it's hard to do because, again, you have to be in that mindset of I got to rebound, get my players involved, and be able to score. And that requires so much energy and effort to be able to do that. Which shows you the level of conditioning this guy's in, too, even at his age. I mean, he's not really that old, but he's in his 30s. I mean, that's not... I mean, that is a little bit younger, I guess, now than it used to be. He's 32 years old, right? He's kind of, in terms of basketball, prime years, he's kind of a little bit past his prime now. I wouldn't say that's the way he's playing. He's definitely not past his prime. But, I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, the fact that he's getting triple-doubles consistently and averaging them is unprecedented. You don't see that happen very much. And that's a credit to his work ethic. It's a credit to his effort. It's a credit to his influence on his teammates that he can be in the game, that he can do that every night. And it's not even close. I mean, he is leading everyone by far in triple doubles. I mean, this is what this guy does. And it's an intensity. It's Kobe Bryant even said that Russell Westbrook had a similar kind of intensity to him. And you get a compliment from that from Kobe. Again, it pays a long way. I mean, Russell Westbrook is the most athletic point guard I've ever seen play. And he's a guy that, at least off the dribble going to the basket, was one of the more unstoppable guys. I just said if this guy could consistently finish around the rim and shoot better percentages, this guy could be the best player in the league. But that's not any slouch. I mean, I know he's not an efficient scorer, but again, he knows what he is. And the thing is, for people saying he's not a good teammate and not a good leader, that's just wrong. That's not true. You ask any of his teammates, they all say the complete opposite. And you look at this Wizards team, they finally bought into him, and what's happened? The team's won. Think about the year he won MVP, right? Where he averaged 30 points, 11 rebounds, and 11 assists, right? That team wasn't that talented, but they got the 6th seed in the freaking Western Conference. Think about that. They got the 6th seed in the Western Conference. That's crazy. They got the 6th seed in the Western Conference. That's ridiculous. And the fact is that he needs respect, right? He's had big moments and he's responded to criticism, right? Stephen A. Smith criticized him. He went out and started winning games. People said, he couldn't, Washington's a laughingstock. Well, they're not anymore. They're not a laughingstock. They're not a above 500 team. But again, they're one game behind for the 8th spot in the Eastern Conference. And if you look at Charlotte, for example, right? Charlotte has to play the Nuggets, the Clippers, the Knicks, and the Wizards in the next 4 games. I'm saying the Wizards get the 8th spot, and they have to play the Celtics, and I think they will beat the Celtics. I really do think they're going to beat the Celtics. The way the Celtics have been playing recently, and I'm going to get this into the Celtics later, but the Wizards have been playing very good basketball by doing it their way, right? Little defense and a lot of high-octane offense. But with that being said, people need to start respecting Westbrook a lot more because the month of May, he's averaged 26.2 points a game, 15.8 rebounds, and 16.4 assists. He had a game where he had 14 points, 21 rebounds, and 24 assists. This is a point guard, guys. It's not like, for example, getting rebounds. I mean, think about it, right? Nikola Jokic averages 10.9 rebounds. He's 7 feet tall. Joel Embiid averages 10.9 rebounds. He's 7 feet tall, right? And what's crazy about all this stuff, and what's crazy to think about, is how basically a point guard is getting the job done every night in terms of rebounds and getting guys involved and everything like that. Russell Westbrook is 6th in the NBA in rebounds. He's a 6'3" point guard. No one else in the top 15 is below 6'9". Clint Capella, 7 feet tall. Rudy Gobert, 7 feet tall. Jonas Valanciunas, 7 feet tall. Sabonis, 6'10". Vucevic, 6'11". Westbrook, 6'3". It's unbelievable. And that's why you guys got to start to appreciate this guy. I mean, he's averaging 15.8 rebounds and 16.4 assists in a month. He's had a game where he had like 33 points in one of their more recent games. I mean, it's unbelievable what this guy's doing. And people sit there and say, oh, he's not a winner. Well, I mean, look, he might not ever win an NBA championship. And I think that in the playoffs, a lot of times his inefficiency from shooting hurts him. But, 22 points a game on 44% shooting is not bad. And he just had a game against the Pacers where he had 33 points, 19 rebounds, and 15 assists. And 2 blocks. It's the intensity, it's the effort. We'll never see a guy like this again in terms of the triple-double machine that he's been. We'll never see this. And he's doing it without being a really good jump shooter. He's shooting 31% from 3. So, it just shows you again that you guys got to start paying more respect to Russell Westbrook. The Wizards have had the fourth best record. The 5th best record of any team in the NBA in the last 20 games. And it's primarily because, yes, Bradley Beal scores a lot of points. He had 50 points the other night. But it's because Russell Westbrook's incredible triple-double play, and they're buying into that intensity now, and it's paying off. Because Scott Brooks knows what Russell Westbrook's about. He coached him for a bunch of years. But now the young players are starting to buy into that leadership and buy into that intensity. And you see the difference. Now, you can criticize Westbrook all you want for maybe the way he's inefficient and the fact that he hasn't performed always great in the playoffs. And those are fair criticisms. But I want to use this time to really appreciate what he's done. He's going to have the most triple-doubles in NBA history. And he's only 32 years old at this point in time. Which means I think he still's got 5 or so years left. Who knows what this guy can do? I think he's got maybe more than that. Who knows? He's playing still incredible basketball. The fact that he's getting triple-doubles left and right. How many years is this guy going to average a triple-double? And people just take it for granted. Oh, it's stat padding. Well, yeah, let's see if Luca Doncic and LeBron stat pad and can get that, right? They get a lot of triple-doubles, but they aren't averaging that. LeBron averaged that for 5 games in an NBA Finals. Westbrook's averaged that for 4 seasons of either 82 or 72 plus games. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable what he can do. It's unbelievable. He needs his respect. And again, everyone looks to hate on a guy who hasn't been able to get the job done, right? And look, you can criticize players like this, of course, but I'm saying that it's important to also appreciate them for what they've done, because we're going to look back when he's retired, 15 years after he's retired, and we're going to say, dang, this guy was an incredible player, and what he did for the game was revolutionary. Steph Curry with his shot, LeBron James with his athleticism and his ability to be versatile. Jokic and Embiid changing big men along with Giannis Antetokounmpo. And then you got Westbrook basically saying triple doubles. You can average them for years, and you can get your team into the playoffs that way. This is why Russell Westbrook is who he is. And whether or not that's fair, whether or not that's accurate, that's not important. What's important is that appreciated. That's the important thing here, guys, is that he needs to have his appreciation seen on a full scale. Because what he's done and what he's going to continue to do is something few guys will be able to actually replicate again. Especially the fact that he's like 6'3", 6'4", and he's sixth in the NBA in rebounds. And he's right now leading the NBA in assists, him and James Harden. I mean, it's unbelievable. Again, I know he hasn't always come up big in the playoffs. I know his team's not always a contender with him leading the charge. I get that. But you have to appreciate a guy like this because they're not going to be around for long, and you're not going to see these type of guys again. I like to appreciate greatness when it's put in front of me. And Westbrook is one of the greatest point guards to ever play the game, even if he doesn't win a championship. And what he's doing in the second half of the season, what he's been doing for his last 4 out of 5 seasons is unbelievable. So it's crazy to think about how good this guy has been playing. Because what he's done and what he's going to continue to do is something that no one or few guys I think will ever be able to do again. And the reason why I bring that up, and I brought this up many times on this segment, is because Russell Westbrook has shown you guys that there is a value into the way he plays. It's so hard to get a triple-double because you have to be able to get your teammates involved, and he's not playing on the most talented team outside of Bradley Beal. Again, you can pass the ball to Bradley Beal, all you want, but again, he's doing this to other guys. He's getting guys that are not big-time scorers, the ball in easy positions. This is what he does. This is who he is. This is why Russell Westbrook is one of the best point guards and one of the best players of this generation. He just is. He may not be a top 5 point guard at this moment in time. That's more just because of consistent winning. But he's definitely the 6th best point guard. He's out on the outside looking in. If he continues to play this way, he might be in the top 5. He's been unbelievable this season. We're going to take a quick commercial break here. When I come back, we're going to break down the Knicks and Clippers game. See you guys soon.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, everyone, to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm Michael Schroeder, your host for this podcast today. Before you listen to this segment, if you haven't checked out my last segment where I talked about the greatness of Russell Westbrook as he tied Oscar Robison for the most triple-doubles in history and why to appreciate this man's greatness, please check that segment out. You will be missing out on a great segment, and before you even get started on listening to this one, you need to listen on to that segment. Later on in my show, I'm going to be talking about who's a bigger threat to the top teams in the Eastern Conference between the Miami Heat and Boston Celtics, as well as breaking down my top 5 point guards in the NBA at this moment in time. But, like I do in mostly every show, about to talk about my New York Knicks and their crazy win against the Los Angeles Clippers yesterday. Also, happy belated Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. But the Knicks had an incredible performance, and they got the job done. The Knicks won 106-100 over the Los Angeles Clippers. The Knicks now move to 38-30 on the season, which actually right now is the same record as the Los Angeles Lakers, which is pretty crazy. Who would have thought that would have happened? And they play the Lakers actually on Tuesday. And they remain at the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. The Clippers moved down to 45-23 on the season. And they still remain in 3rd place in the Western Conference. Didn't really do a whole lot to their standings. And they play at Toronto tonight. Or, my bad, they play at Toronto tomorrow. But what's interesting about that is that this is a big win for the Knicks, right? The Knicks just came off 2 really bad performances where they got blown out by the Nuggets and they got blown out late in the 4th quarter by the Phoenix Suns after having a stretch where they won 12 out of the last 13. Well, again, this stuff happens, right? You're playing against really high-quality teams. Stuff happens. Stuff happens, right? You're playing against 2 of the top teams in the West, 3 of the top teams in the West. Things happen, right? And now they're going to play against the Los Angeles Lakers on Tuesday, which will be an interesting test, right? Anthony Davis just came off a 42-point game, and they beat Phoenix. So that's a game the Knicks have to come out ready to play and have to bring their full intensity to that game because the Knicks don't have an easy stretch. They have the Lakers, the Spurs, the Hornets, and the Celtics to end the season, which those are games that I think they can win all of them, but those are also games they can lose all of them too. So this is important. This is a very important win for the Knicks, but they can't get too high on themselves, which they haven't done all season yet. And they need to continue this progression into the right way for this team. They have to continue getting the job done. But I'm going to give away some major takeaways I took from this game because what I like to do with games like this is explain a little bit about what I took away from the game and what this means for both teams. Because look, I'm a big Knicks fan. You guys who have listened to me in the past know how big of a Knicks fan I am. I'm so happy the way they're playing this year. I think they're going to get out of the first round. But, they have some things, obviously, they need to correct. But I think this win against the Clippers shows that the Knicks can hang with a lot of the real top teams in the NBA. Now, I don't think they would beat teams like Milwaukee, Brooklyn, or Philly in a 7-game series. They most likely won't. Could they get a game or two from some of those teams? Yeah. But we'll see how that goes actually at that point in time. But I have about 10 or so takeaways from this game, and I'm going to break them down. First one is Julius Randle came up really big when the Knicks needed him most. To the Clippers' credit, they did a really good job on Julius Randle yesterday. They double-teamed him a lot, made a lot of his shots really difficult. He didn't even make a 3, and he's been shooting 42% on the year. So, they played really good defense on Julius Randle. But when they needed him to hit big shots, he had a big shot over Nicholas Batum and a big shot over Paul George to basically seal the game for the Knicks. And that's important because, look, the Knicks have guys like Derrick Rose who can shoot late in the game, right? They have Alec Burks who they can go to at times, right? But having their best player who's more of a power forward kind of player, right? Have him be able to hit big shots when they need him. That's a great sign, right? Especially as they continue to build this team for the future. That's a great sign to see him hit a big shot in a big moment and get the job done. Now, he has been doing that more recently, obviously. But I'm saying against a really good quality team in a game that he's struggling to still hit 2 huge clutch shots to seal the game for the Knicks is crucial in terms of what the Knicks can do going forward. And look, Julius Randle's become one of my favorite players in the NBA because I love the way that he is a hard worker. I love that he doesn't complain. I love the way that he just goes and works every day and gets better. I love the fact that he's now becoming more of a all-around versatile player where it's not just his scoring, but he's defending better. He's rebounding a little bit better than he did last season. And he's also the only guy in Knicks history to be averaging over 20 points, over 10 rebounds, and over 5 assists. And that gets your teammates better, right? And he's in the conversation right now for MVP. It's crazy. But I think the thing that's crazier about it is the fact that Julius Randle even struggled yesterday, right? He immensely struggled. He set 7 of 19 for the floor and had 14 points. But he had 14 rebounds. He had 5 assists. He did other things, right? But when he had to hit his big shots, he hit them. He didn't get any free throws, right? He was getting double-teamed all night. He was missing shots. But when they needed him to hit shots, he did it. And that is the mark of a player evolving into being an elite player, which he's become this season. And it'll be interesting to see the Knicks do this summer, obviously, with him, because he, based on how he's going to perform in the playoffs and everything like that. But that was big for the Knicks to see that happen. Huge. Because you need your best player to be able to show glimpses that he could take over a game, right? And Julius Randle has the capabilities of hitting jump shots from that mid-range or three-point arc. And seeing him hit two huge, well-defended pull-up jump shots. One from the left corner over Nicholas Batum, and then the other one on like the left wing where he went to his pad and one dribble with his right hand, step back over Paul George. And making those shots, it comes from hard work. I've talked about Julius Randle before, right? The amount of effort this guy put in, the amount of resiliency. I mean, Tom Thibodeau even said his level of conditioning that he saw when he came in made him more inspired to invest his time into a guy like Julius Randle. Because Julius Randle has actually been a good player in the NBA. He just hasn't quite lived up, I think, to the potential that people wanted from him. Right? No one really thought of him as an elite all-star and all-NBA type of player. But he's getting the job done anyway. And that shows you what Julius Randle can be. The second thing is Derrick Rose has continued his stellar play of late. The last 10 or so games, he's averaged over 19 points a game. And against the Clippers yesterday afternoon, he was 11 of 17 and had 25 big points. Now, 19 of those came in the first half, but he was the reason the Knicks had that lead in the first half. They were 56-54, and that was primarily because Derrick Rose was dominating the Clippers. It didn't matter who was guarding him. He was getting to his spots. He hit a bunch of mid-range jump shots. His floater's pretty amazing, actually, how efficient he is with that shot. And then he hit threes. And again, having Derrick Rose off the bench, right, you conserve his energy at the beginning of the game because he's going to play 30-plus minutes. And then you put him at the late in the game where he can be that secondary scorer or third scorer, and whatever they need from him, he just can come off the bench and just give you numbers scoring-wise. And he's kind of shown people that the Pistons made a big mistake. This is, I think, the best thing the Knicks did was, one, getting Tom Thibodeau, and then I think two was getting Derrick Rose, because Derrick Rose has really had a positive impact on this team. He really has. He's had a huge impact on this team. I mean, look at the amount of big games he's had recently, right? I mean, this is the Clippers team are not like a bad defensive team either. In terms of field goal percentage, defense, they're top 5. No, sorry, not field goal percentage, scoring defense, they're top 5. Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Marcus Morris. People put Patrick Beverley in that conversation too, obviously, but it didn't matter. Derrick Rose just torched all these guys. And that's important because if Derrick Rose can be a guy off the bench that can be counted on night after night, the Knicks are going to be in good shape when it comes to postseason, especially because Julius Randle was off. He was getting double-teamed all game, and teams are going to do that to him all playoff long because they know that Julius Randle is by far their best player. So they're going to say, okay, Derrick Rose and RJ Barrett, you beat us. Well, Derrick Rose was a big reason that they were able to win this game yesterday because of the stellar play he put together yesterday. And it was stellar. I mean, 11 out of 17 is incredibly efficient. 25 points against a really legitimate team is incredibly efficient. And it just, again, it credits the fact that he knows Thibodeau. Thibodeau's believing in him. And that he's willing to at least change his career around to get the best out of his game and the best out of the players around him. That's what Thibodeau's done. And look at Derrick Rose, right? I mean, Derrick Rose is averaging identical stats to Detroit, but Detroit didn't really want him. And now look at him. He's playing a bigger role on a playoff team and actually contributing in a really good way for them to win games. It just shows you what he's capable of. Next thing, obviously, is that the other guy stepped up. Reggie Bullock had 24 points, RJ Barrett at 18, Obi Toppin at 7 points, and Taj Gibson at 8. Elfrid Payton a bunch of steals, and Nerlens Noel had a couple blocks. Again, right, the others just got to be able to step up because, and this is important, this just goes down to why Thibodeau should be the coach of the year. Because he's gotten these guys to buy into their roles so effectively. And then when Julius Randle gets double-teamed, these guys know where to be, and they know their roles really well. And RJ Barrett's taking a big step up this year. Reggie Bullock being able to defend the other guys, best perimeter guy, and hit threes at a consistent rate. Obi Toppin getting more comfortable. Taj Gibson being a good big guy off the bench that can give you some really valuable minutes. This is what Thibodeau has brought to this team. And this is why the Knicks are in a much better shape than they were previously. Now, the defense of the Knicks is another point I'm going to bring up. They held the Clippers to 34.5% from three. The Clippers are a top three, or my apologies, they're the best three-point shooting team in the NBA right now. And they have the second best offense in the NBA right now. They were held to 100 points yesterday, and they only shot 34.5% from three. And the crazier thing is that Kawhi was held to 9 of 26 shooting, and Paul George was held to 8 of 20 shooting. Paul George only had 4 second-half points. Kawhi Leonard had 16 second-half points, but he shot 5 of 15, right? It was just like a lot of shots late that he hit, but the Knicks defense was unbelievable. They just, they're physical, they're disciplined, and they don't have a guy like an elite-level defender known on their team. They just have an elite-level defensive concept. And the thing is, they're beating quality teams their way. Slow pace, physical, move the ball on offense, collective guys are contributing, and then you look at the fact their defense is just top-notch. That's why they're winning games. That's why they're in games. Defense wins championships. It's why Tom Thibodeau will be, if he's not the coach of the year, someone's making a grave mistake. A grave mistake. Because the Knicks weren't predicted to be in this spot anyway. But on the Clippers side, they did show some alarming things again, right? And the fact is that Paul George and Kawhi just did not come up big in the second half. Yeah, I know Kawhi had 16 points in the second half, guys. I get it. But Kawhi shot 9 of 26 from the floor to get 29 points. He was 5 of 15 in the second half. And it wasn't like he was taking horrible shots. There was a lot of mid-range post-ups, a lot of drives to the rim. It's because of Nick's size, their discipline, not going for pump fakes, contesting every shot that he took, made things difficult. Paul George, right, getting in his airspace, contested shots, right? The Clippers didn't get like easy shots in the second half. And that's primarily because of the Knicks, right? The Knicks held them to 46 points in the second half. That's because that's what the Knicks do. It's what they do. They make things difficult for you to win based on the fact that their defense is so sound. And the problem is this is like a carryover effect for the Clippers a lot of the time. Like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George in a couple games this year against Denver, at Milwaukee, this Knicks game, they just haven't come up big when they had to, right? Even at Dallas, right? When Luca torched them at the end of the game. Again, I talked about Paul George on my most recent episode, right? He can't play like this in the second half where he gives you 4 points and goes 2 of 7 from the floor. I mean, you can't do that. He's too good, right? But that being said, though, it's not because he just didn't come ready to play. It's because of the Knicks defense, right? The Knicks made things difficult for him, right? They were hounding these guys, making them take really difficult contested shots. And there was less ball movement on the Clippers than it was in the first half, where the Clippers were getting easier baskets. Also, the fact is, besides Nicholas Batum, who had 13 points off the bench, no one else really stepped up off the bench. I mean, Cousins had 8 points, but then Rondo had 4 points, and Beverly had 3 points. I mean, if you're not going to get much from your bench, I mean, think about the Knicks bench, right? Obi Toppin had 7 points, Derrick Rose had 25, Taj Gibson had 8. Much bigger performances off the bench. That was a big difference, right? And the thing is, right, is that with the Clippers, right, Paul George and Kawhi have to find ways to be more efficient, right? I know that the Knicks play great defense on them, but those shots, I saw a lot of them, right? Those are shots that Kawhi can hit. Those are shots that Paul George can hit. And again, you got to be better if you want to win a championship, right? The Knicks are not a better team than the Clippers from a talent perspective, but they played better defense, they played more together, and they actually made more plays down the stretch, and they bought into their defensive game plan. That's why they won this game. With that being said, the Knicks are back. Yes, they are back. Okay, look, they lost 2 straight games, all right, to the Denver Nuggets, who are 4th in the Western Conference, who have the MVP, and the Phoenix Suns, who are 2nd in the Western Conference, who have 2 really high-level superstars. They just beat the Los Angeles Clippers, who a lot of people think are going to come out of the Western Conference, right? Them, the Lakers, or the Jazz. And rightfully so, because the Clippers have Paul George, a top 15 player, and Kawhi Leonard, a top 5 player. And they look at this and say, yeah, this team's got to be able to get it done, right? And you're going to probably hear people today probably saying how Kawhi Leonard and Paul George didn't show up in the fourth quarter. but it's because the Knicks are back. Their defense is just exceptional, right? And with that being said, right, if you're a superstar player that's getting criticized, you got to be able to overcome those problems. However, the Knicks have shown time and time again that they can't be doubted, right? Their defense, the way they play at their slower pace, does work, right? It does work for winning. It's why Thibodeau has to be Coach of the Year. And I'm going to say that again. He has to be Coach of the Year because what he's done, what he's brought to this team is something that can't be ignored. And that's where I go with this whole argument, is the fact that the Knicks are back. In the sense that they're playing like the 1990s New York Knicks, right? Physical, great defense, beating teams their way, right? Not buying into the cute, high offense, high scoring ways of the NBA. They're not buying into that, right? They're doing it their way. Thibodeau's old school, hold guys accountable, defense, discipline. They've been the biggest surprise of the NBA. And again, this is just another stepping stone in the right direction. They got a big game. I mean, they have to keep it rolling as they play the Los Angeles Lakers. Right? The Lakers just came off a huge win against Phoenix where they beat them by 13 points, and Anthony Davis had 42 points. Anthony Davis just had a 36-point game at Portland, and then he's had a 42-point game against the Phoenix Suns. So the Knicks got their hands full definitely on Tuesday. Especially, look, if LeBron comes back, that might be a little different. But even to Anthony Davis, right, that's not an easy matchup. But the way the Knicks play can be a formula for winning, games in the playoffs. And that's where I go with this argument, right? The Clippers are still contenders, by the way. But their clutch play and the fact is that they struggled against a legitimate defensive team, especially in the second half, does raise a little bit of eyebrows if this team's going to actually be a legitimate contender and actually win a championship. I still think they are because I think they have the talent to do so, and they've proven it a lot of times this year. But that second half by their two superstars, that's not going to be acceptable against better teams. It just shows you, again, that talent and coaching are not mutually exclusive, right? The Knicks Tom Thibodeau outcoached Tyronn Lue yesterday. Simple as that. He outcoached Tyronn Lue. Ran better offense than him, right? He had the guys, he was, telling the guys, Julius Randle when the doubles were coming, told the guys where to cut, got the ball to open shooters. Defensively, he had guys slough over to when Paul George and Kawhi had the ball, right? Contest their three-point shooters, rebound, right? The Knicks out-rebounded the Clippers too, right? And this is just an interesting thing to just acknowledge for everyone, right? Is that the Knicks do it their way. And this is why Tom Thibodeau is going to be Coach of the Year. He has to be Coach of the Year. I know Monty Williams has done great. I know Quinn Snyder has done great. But if Tom Thibodeau does not win Coach of the Year, what are we doing, guys? The Knicks have been the biggest surprise. No one expected the Knicks to be this way. No one. No one expected this. And, I certainly didn't expect this. Right? So, this is just what I'm saying, guys. Is that, this whole argument that the Knicks can't get it done. Okay. Well, the Knicks have been the biggest surprise this year, and Thibodeau should be Coach of the Year. No ifs, ands, or buts. He has to be Coach of the Year. And it's just, I sit there and say, this is another prime example, and the Knicks right now show me that, you know what? This team can definitely get out of the first round of the playoffs, and they can at least make something interesting in the second round. Not saying they're going to win a series. They'll probably lose in 5 games to most of those teams, but you never know, right? Because this team plays good enough defense to keep them in games. We're going to take a quick commercial break here, and when I come back, we're going to talk about who's a bigger threat in the Eastern Conference, the Miami Heat or the Boston Celtics. Also later on, we're going to break down my top 5 point guards. All that coming back up after I see you guys from this commercial break. See you soon.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm Michael Schroeder, your host for this podcast today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you guys are all having a very terrific Tuesday. Hope you guys are enjoying that. If you missed my last segment, I talked about the New York Knicks versus the Los Angeles Clippers. The Knicks beat the Clippers yesterday. I talked about the significance of that. I also talked about why the level of play in the second half of the Clippers does show the concerns that people had from them based on last year's bubble performance against the Denver Nuggets. Also, later on in my show, I'm going to be breaking down my top 5 point guards in the NBA. Also, if you guys missed my first segment, it's about Russell Westbrook, appreciating his greatness. And the reason I brought that up is because he tied Oscar Robison for the most triple-doubles all time, and he's only 32 years old. So, before you even listen to this segment, listen to those two before. Make sure you're caught up on this show today. The Eastern Conference, obviously, this year has been an interesting story, right? Obviously, you have the Wizards who have now put themselves one game behind Charlotte for the 8th spot. The Knicks have been a pleasant surprise, getting to the 4th spot in the Eastern Conference. The Atlanta Hawks, under Nate McMillan, have really turned themselves around. But you have teams like the Miami Heat and the Boston Celtics that people are still looking at as legitimate threats in the Eastern Conference. They played yesterday, and Miami basically controlled the game for most of it. But in the fourth quarter, they kind of put their foot off the gas, didn't really run great offense, and their defense was not as strong, and beat Boston by 6 points. So Boston almost made a comeback back down from 26. So it was a little bit concerning the way that Miami finished that game, but credit to Boston for their level of fight and determination to try and win that game. Evan Fournier had an unbelievable game. He had like 30 points. And Jason Tatum had 29. But what I'm going to do is break down this segment is who's a bigger threat in the Eastern Conference, right? If you put these teams and you said, okay, you got to go win a 7-game series against the Sixers, the Bucks, or the Nets, who do I trust more to be able to at least make it, to try and maybe win that series or make it a more difficult series? And the reason why I bring up these two teams is because these two teams made the Eastern Conference Finals last year. And Boston and with Brad Stevens and Miami with Eric Spoelstra are teams that have good coaches. But right now, Miami's the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference, 2 games up on Boston. And Boston's right now in that play-in tournament. They're the 7th seed at the moment in time. And you don't really want to be in that play-in, because the way Washington's playing, you really don't want to be in that situation. Because if I think Washington gets the 8th seed, I think Washington would end up getting that 7th spot over Boston. I really do. With that being said, though, we're going to talk about who the bigger threat is, right? Break this down for you guys. And we're going to break it down by looking at my reasonings for it. I have a bunch of reasons why I have the team as a bigger threat as I do, and I'll break that down for you guys because it's important to understand that these teams have definitely both underachieved this season due to the fact that they've both had a lot of COVID issues, injuries, etc., right? I think Boston's had more issues in terms of play on the court, but Miami hasn't had a really clicking offense either, and that's because of all the people in and out of the lineups for both teams, right? So now we're going to get down to the heart of the matter. Who is the bigger threat, right? And it's by far the Miami Heat. Miami Heat are the bigger threat. It's not even close. And I know that the season series is tied up at 1 game apiece. I know that people are going to sit there and say, well, Boston, played much better in the second half and made it a game. I get that. They didn't have Jaylen Brown. Okay, fine. I get it. The Heat were up by 26 points. The Heat were up by 20 entering the fourth quarter. They just didn't execute very well down the stretch. And it wasn't because Boston was playing exceptionally good defense. It was because Miami was just not running very efficient offense. Again, Duncan Robinson had like 20-something points. And again, if you're Miami, that's great. But if you're Boston, he shouldn't be scoring over 20 points because all he does is catch and shoot threes. And no offense to Duncan Robinson, I mean, he's an unbelievable player, unbelievable shooter. But if Boston, knows that their whole offense with Miami is equal opportunity, handoffs, and pitch outs for threes, or then isolating Jimmy Butler one-on-one or Bam Adebayo one-on-one in the post, then you know that you have to stay glued to a guy like Duncan Robinson and not let him get open looks. And he got open look out of open look. It just shows you again that this is the problem, right? Miami's a bigger threat, right? Because they've beaten Brooklyn. They've beaten Milwaukee, right? And they're a top 5 defense in the NBA. They have championship experience, right? And what I mean by that is that Eric Spoelstra has won 2 NBA finals. Pat Riley, the president of basketball operations, has won multiple NBA titles. From my understanding, he's won 6 NBA titles. And they also have guys in Jimmy Butler, their whole team played in NBA finals last year. Basically. Their whole team played in the NBA finals last year. And that experience alone, the fact that they already have beaten Boston last year in the playoffs, and they have a better coach, makes me more confident in this team, right? Jimmy Butler also is big time. You saw in the second half, right? Jimmy Butler can take over any game that a team needs him to take over. And I watched Jimmy Butler. I watched the way he plays, and it's pretty simple, right? Jimmy Butler goes out there and gets the job done when he needs to, right? First half, not scoring a whole ton, getting the guys involved. And then when he had to take over the game, he had a huge third quarter and a huge fourth quarter with big bucket after big bucket, right? And this is who he is. Jimmy Butler is probably one of the guys I trust the most, actually, in playoff situations based on last year's bubble, based on his mindset, based on the way that he's got Miami to buy into his leadership. Because think about it, Jimmy Butler is a guy who had to claw his way up from being doubted and not appreciated to being one of the top players in basketball at this moment in time, right? And last year, he basically overtook everyone in the bubble, dominated, did what he was supposed to do, and you look at it, right, and he's big time, right? Like you watched yesterday, he's big time. Making plays for other guys, right? Scoring when he had to. And the thing is, he does it by not shooting a lot of threes, from basically shooting mid-range jump shots and getting to the basket, from being smart, for understanding how to run the offense effectively, and just from being experienced. And the thing is, like, this reporter asked him recently, if you guys got a really tough schedule, 2 against Boston, you play Milwaukee and Philly, that's a tough schedule. And he's like, do you think that's tough to the reporter? Like, the thing is, his mindset is like, we're going to get this job done. We don't care. And that's why I say he's big time. You have to trust this guy in big situations because he understands how to get the job done. He does. He understands what to do to get the team over the top. He understands it. And when you have a superstar that understands how to get there, how to be good, how to be great every day, how to build championship habits, that's important. That's important, guys. And I mean, just think about it, right? Why does LeBron James always get to the NBA Finals? Because he builds championship habits within himself, within his team, and his coaches also instill the same type of values based on just seeing the level of what he plays at, right? You look at Kobe Bryant, right? Build championship habits every day. Jordan, build championship habits every day, right? Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, right? All the great players. I'm not saying Jimmy Butler's in that category, but he has that same type of demeanor and persona about like the way he does things, right? He doesn't complain. He'll call his teammates when they don't do things right. He'll do everything he can to win the game himself. And what's interesting is that, You had last year where he was telling LeBron James he was in trouble after winning one game, and everyone was kind of laughing at him for that. But look, I mean, his team gave the Lakers the toughest series out of any team in the entire playoffs because of the way that he plays and the way that he brings intensity. Now, I know this Miami team might not be quite the same, and I get that. But they have Eric Spoelstra as head coach. They have a better coach. Brad Stevens is a good coach, all right? I don't think he should be on the hot seat. I think he's a very, very good coach. But Eric Spoelstra, in my opinion, is the best coach in basketball. Or at least top two. The fact that he gets guys to buy in with not superior talent. The fact that he can run an equal opportunity offense with guys who when he doesn't even have an all-star on that team this year. And like the Celtics had 2 all-stars right now, and they've been struggling. The last 9 games, they're 3-6. They've been really up and down all year. Yeah, people are saying, oh, well, look at them. They came back against San Antonio. San Antonio is the 10th seed in the Western Conference. And Jason Tatum had to score 60 in order for that to happen. It's unbelievable what he did. Don't get me wrong, Jason Tatum's a great player. He had 29 points yesterday. He's a great player. But Miami has a better coach, a better defensive system, greater championship experience because those guys have actually been to an NBA Finals. And it just makes a lot more sense. I mean, look at the fact that, like, with Boston, right, there's less versatility in terms of their defense because their big guys are athletic and they can move, but they're not Bam Adebayo. Bam Adebayo can guard every position. And he's gotten better, right? His mid-range jump shot's better. He's an 80% free throw shooter. He's a guy that's active on the glass. And Bam Adebayo had a big-time effect at the end of the game, right? Where he ended the game with 20 points yesterday. And it's what's funny about that, too, is that I look at it, the way he's played, right? He's averaging 18.9 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists, right? And what's crazy about that is that he's improved every year. He's only 23 years old, and he's made massive improvements in his game. Right? And what's crazier about that, too, is that what he does is that he orchestrates the offense for the Miami Heat. Right? He orchestrates it, but also defensively, you're not in any trouble if he switches on to the team's best guard because he can stay in front of those guys. He can. That's what he's like known for being good at. And that's important for people to understand. Right? And that's important for you guys to understand because what he's been able to do is get the job done defensively. And you look at Miami, right? They're just well coached. They're a well-oiled machine. Now, look, they haven't been necessarily consistent every night, but they played much better basketball recently. I mean, besides that win against Boston yesterday, they've just been playing much better basketball than the Boston Celtics of late. And I also go by the fact that Miami has proven that they can go far in the playoffs compared to Boston. I'm saying, like, at least get to the NBA Finals, right? And the thing is, Miami's not even going to, like, be happy with that result yesterday. They're going to be like, all right, well, we got to get the job done. Because if you think about it, right? You think about it. Miami, the last, let's start in May 1st, right? They have won 4 out of their last 5 games. Actually, even going back, they've won 5 out of their last 6. Only loss coming to Dallas, right? And look, they have a tough stretch coming up, but I trust them more, right? Defense wins championships. They also beat Boston, right? And look, Miami has been solid all year long with having to deal with all their injuries and COVID pauses and everything like that. Boston, who has 2 All-Stars, has been really up and down all year. Really up and down, really inconsistent. Like, Evan Fournier is playing much better basketball, but they don't play great defense. I mean, if I'm going to look at defensive efficiency right now, defensive efficiency, I can look at it right now. Miami, like I said, top 5 team in defensive efficiency, right? And what's interesting about that is that, so you have defensive efficiency, right? You have defensive efficiency, and you look at it and you say, Miami's 5th, right? Miami's 5th. My bad, Miami's 6th. Okay. You get the point, though. Miami's much better. Boston, on the other hand, is 16th in the NBA in defensive efficiency. 16th. They're worse than teams like San Antonio and Chicago defensively. And if you look at last year, that wasn't the case. Boston was third in defensive efficiency last year because they had guys like Daniel Tice, because they had Marcus Smart was more consistent defensively, right? And also I look at the role players, right? I trust more the production of guys like Iguodala, Goran Dragic, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero over guys like Fournier, Marcus Smart, Aaron Nesmith, who had a good game yesterday, Carson Edwards, Robert Williams, and Tristan Thompson. Robert Williams can't stay healthy. Tristan Thompson hasn't really been a consistent offensive scorer, besides the fact that he's been a really good offensive rebounder. And Fournier's played well recently, but he had a horrible start for Boston. And then you also have Aaron Nesmith, who just had a great game, but he's been averaging like 2 points a game the entire year. And Marcus Smart, man, I mean, I know he has like his moments, but he makes a lot of plays during the game that really are head scratchers. Really are. And it's tough to watch at times. Really tough to watch. And I'm going to look at this in a couple ways, right? So from Boston's side, right, their health has been a major problem, right? COVID pauses, whatever, right? Jaylen Brown's still out. Robert Williams had to leave with a toe injury. And Jason Tatum was out with COVID, right? Marcus Smart was out with a huge injury. Tristan Thompson was out for a while. I mean, it's their health has really been a big issue why they haven't been very good this year. Hasn't built great continuity. And they've underachieved, right? They're the 7th seed. They were a third seed in the Eastern Conference last year and got to the Eastern Conference Finals. That's definitely not going to happen this year. And the inconsistency play of the others. What I mean by that is like Kemba Walker. He's played well recently, but he's been very inconsistent all year. I mean, I know the last couple of games he's averaged like 27 points a game, but to be honest, I know he scored 33 the other night, but he's still, shooting 41% from the floor, 36% from three. I mean, those aren't really efficient numbers. And his PER is 17.4. That tells you he's not very efficient. And compared to where he was his first year in Boston, his points are way down. Way down. And I know he had 33 points the other night against Miami, but again, Marcus Smart, he's been very inconsistent. And it's not because of just the fact that it's a bad shot taking, right? It's the turnovers. I know he brings a lot defensively for you, and I know he's a great defender, but I mean, he shoots 39.8% from the floor, and I can look at his stats yesterday, personally, and I can sit there and say, this guy had too many turnovers. He's averaging 2 turnovers a game this year, which is the most he's averaged in the last 3 seasons. He's shooting worse than the free throw line, and from 3 he's only 33%, and he shoots a lot of them. He shoots almost like 6 a game. So that's another point there. You look at guys like Robert Williams, right? In and out of the lineup, inconsistent with his play and not being able to stay out of foul trouble. Tristan Thompson not really necessarily being a great offensive scorer, just being a rebounder, right? Getting rid of a guy like Daniel Tice, who I think has been a really good piece, at least for Chicago. Right? Chicago beat Boston recently. Because Boston has no interior presence that scares you offensively. Tristan Thompson scares you on the offensive glass, but he doesn't really scare you in terms of him going to get 15 points on you. And that's been Boston's biggest problem. They just don't really have a consistent play from the other guys outside of really... And even Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown haven't been consistent in terms of their health, even their play, right? I mean, you look at Tatum, for example, right? Tatum had 60 points against the Spurs. Then he comes back against the Bulls and he's 3 for 15 shooting and 9 points. Now, he had 29 yesterday, but again, it's just like an inconsistency with him. He still hasn't quite got to the point where people are looking at him and saying, this guy has really matured and gotten consistent. I think he's very good, but the thing is, there are people who I've talked to who literally say that they're very concerned about his maturity in the sense that in terms of his game, because he still hasn't really become a playmaker, and he shoots all the time and doesn't always shoot a great percentage. And then the other point is that there's a lack of defensive intensity, right? Like I said, Boston is 16th in defensive efficiency. And what's funny about that is that, last year they were third, right? With basically a very similar supporting cast. They had Gordon Hayward last year who helped their offense a lot more. But what's funny about that is that basically they go from third to 16th. I mean, that's a dramatic change. You want to win an NBA championship. You want to contend in the Eastern Conference. What's interesting about that, like I look at Boston. Boston is 12th in opponents' shooting percentage. That's not bad. It's not, but last year they were definitely higher than that. Last year they were third in that category. This year they're 12th. It's defensive intensity. Again, they allowed 130 points yesterday to a team in Miami that's not a top-ranked offense. And it's just, again, there's been more inconsistent play, less of the guys being in sync. And in terms of offensive efficiency, I just want to bring this up for you guys right now. Miami is 19th in offensive efficiency. 19th. And what's funny is I'm probably going to look at last year. Yeah, Boston, who's 11th right now in offensive efficiency, was 5th last year. It's just a different kind of thing with them, right? They're just not as good offensively, a lot worse defensively. Everything is not pointing in the right direction. Health, consistency, being in sync, offense, defense. And that's why I trust Miami more. Because at least, look, Miami's not a great offensive team. I mean, they were 9th last year in offensive efficiency. They're 19th this year. But they played better basketball recently, and at least they have the experience and they have all their guys healthy. Where I sit there and say, this team still has a great chance to contend. They still got a great chance to contend. And that's the point I think people don't really get with this, is that you have to be consistent as you're heading toward the playoffs for me to have more trust, right? The reason why Miami was good, Miami was playing good basketball entering the postseason, right? Boston has not been playing good basketball, right? In Boston, if they're in the play-in, the Wizards can totally beat them. The Hornets can totally beat them. The Hornets have already blown them out in the game this year already at Charlotte. I mean, who knows at this point, right? Like, again, it's all, you don't want to be in that play-in spot. And right now, Boston, I don't trust them at all. And Boston fans are assuring everyone, we're going to be able to get the job done. We can beat Milwaukee and Philly. Well, when your offense is a lot worse than it's been, when your players have been more inconsistent in terms of the others, when Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have been in and out of the lineup and have had inconsistent type of nights, even though they've been all-stars this year, it doesn't always raise a high level of optimism for me based on how this team has looked. And I want to see more consistent play, right? I don't want to see a team playing the way they're playing right now because they're not playing elite-level basketball. They're playing really mediocre level basketball. And I know Miami hasn't played that way all year long too, but Miami has won 5 out of their last 6, and they just beat Boston and have a great chance to beat them on Tuesday, and right now they're 2 games up. And I think that I would trust them a lot more against Brooklyn because they've beaten Brooklyn based on playing good defense. And Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler, and the funny thing is actually, Bam Adebayo has beaten Brooklyn twice based on the fact that he's played really well, and that's without Jimmy Butler. So I'm not saying they can beat Brooklyn. I'm saying they give them a tougher challenge. They've beaten Milwaukee before, right? And Philly, at least, I mean, Philly would be a tough matchup, but they can match up with them because Ben Simmons doesn't shoot, right? And I just trust them more in those situations. We're going to take a quick commercial break here. When I come back, I'm going to give you guys my top 5 point guard list. Be really interesting to debate that with you guys and have a fun list that you guys can actually think about and start seeing if you agree or disagree. All that coming back up after this quick break. See you guys soon.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm Michael Schroeder, your host for this podcast today. And thank you so much for tuning in. If you missed my previous segments, the one I talked about first was about Russell Westbrook. The second one I talked about was the New York Knicks beating the Los Angeles Clippers. And the most recent one, which please check all these out, was about the fact of the Eastern Conference. I'm looking at who is a bigger threat between the Boston Celtics and the Miami Heat. But now this segment, I'm going to talk about my top 5 point guards in the NBA at this moment in time. Right? My top 5 point guards. So this will be really fun and really interesting, I think. But we're going to break this down for you guys because there's been a lot of debate with that. Because Ja Morant recently came out and said, I'm a top 5 point guard for sure in the NBA. And Russell Westbrook's incredible play, obviously. And the play of guys like Chris Paul, Luca Doncic, James Harden, Steph Curry, Damian Lillard, right? All these guys, I mean, even you can group like Derrick Rose, his incredible play. I mean, I'm not saying he's in any of that conversation, but Mike Conley, I mean, the list goes on, right? So I'm going to break it down for you guys, right? I'm going to start at number 5, like I usually do with these kind of rankings, then build it up to number 1, give you my reasoning why I think each guy's ranked where they are, and why I didn't include certain guys in the list, right? So before I even get started by top 5, the guys that are on the outside looking in are Russell Westbrook, are guys like Ja Morant, Mike Conley, Kemba Walker. I put Kyrie as a shooting guard, so I think Kyrie's more of a 2 than he is a 1. So if I did a shooting guard list, I'd probably have Kyrie in that list. But Kyrie's not in my top 5 point guard list because he's not a point guard. So those are guys I don't have on the list. And the reason I don't is because based on the fact of their team hasn't been as successful. And I think that the guys' level of production ahead of them has been slightly better, right? In terms of winning, right? So, for example, Chris Paul is my number 5, right? And some people say, well, why do you have Chris Paul over a guy like Russell Westbrook? It's simple because the fact that Chris Paul has gotten and generated more winning on his team than Russell Westbrook has. Russell Westbrook recently has played really good basketball, and the Wizards have done incredibly well. But Chris Paul has generally had this team second seed in the West majority of the year, and they have the second best record right now in the entire NBA. And that's because of him, right? That's really because of him, right? Because he's a great leader. He's a guy that can build winning, right? He gets guys to buy in. He holds guys accountable. And being a point guard means getting the best out of your teammates, but leading on the court. You have to be a leader. You have to be the other person's side. Like you have to be like kind of like a coach on the floor. That's what I was looking for, right? You got to be a coach on the floor, and that's what he is. He's a guy that holds guys accountable. He tells the guys where to be, and he's averaging 8.7 assists. He's been consistent all year, right? Averaging 16 points, 8.7 assists. He's tough. He's driven. He's been in the MVP conversation a lot recently. He gets guys better, right? Because he's a good defender. Because the Phoenix right now has a top 6 or 7 defensive team in the NBA. Right now, I think they're 7th in defensive efficiency, and then they're top 10 in offensive efficiency, and that's because of Chris Paul. Because he gets guys better. He gets guys involved, right? He's not the best player on the Phoenix Suns. That's Devin Booker. But he's a guy that's the most valuable to this team because he gets everything running in the right direction. And this is who he is. He's a guy that gets the most out of his team. And this is why he's considered, in my opinion, a top 5 point guard. Because he's tough and he's driven. He gets guys better. Like I said, he's not as elite of a scorer, but he can score when he has to compared to what he used to be, right? And the thing is, his team is winning, right? They're winning games, and it's because of his production. It's because he gets guys involved. It's because of his defense. It's because of his leadership. It's because he's always been consistent in terms of being a guy that can get a team to win games. Look at the Clippers. Look at the New Orleans Hornets when he was there. Look at the OKC Thunder last year with all their young guys, right? That team was the 5th seed in the entire Western Conference and took the Houston Rockets with Russell Westbrook, PJ Tucker, Eric Gordon, James Harden, Daniel House. I mean, the list goes on to a 7-game series and lost by 1 possession. Because Chris Paul, in terms of clutch stats, is one of the top guys in the league too. So he's clutch. He's a great leader. All the stuff that you look for in a great player, he embodies all of that. And that's why he's number 5 on my list. The reason why he's not ahead of the other guys on my list is because he just hasn't had the stats or the PER or the overall impact in terms of just being an overall just a better player offensively. He's a valuable guy because of his leadership and what he brings, but from an offensive impact, these other guys who I have ahead of him have just slightly a better impact on the game. And also the fact that the other guys ahead of him, some of the guys have proven a little bit more in the playoffs too, right? But that's where I go with that. Now, number 4, I have Luca Doncic, right? People saying that this guy's a forward. No, he's a point guard, right? He runs the offense. He gets everyone else involved, everything like that, right? He's in his 3rd year, and he's still averaging 28, 8, and 9. It's unbelievable what he's doing. Dallas is even better than they were last year in terms of where they're positioned. They're the 5th seed in the Western Conference. He's an elite-level playmaker. He's improved his three-point shooting to the fact that he's 35% right now. He's carrying his team to wins, right? They've won their last 3 games, and he even got thrown out for a flagrant foul the other night. And Luka Doncic is unbelievable, right? He's unbelievable because he gets his guys involved. He's an elite-level offensive scorer. He's got everything you want. He's young, and he can build a team around him. And he again, Dallas is a top 10 offense this year, and they were the best offense last year. And when you put him on a team, your team automatically gets better, right? He's not a defender like Chris Paul is, but he's a lot better offensively. And this Dallas team is not as talented because Porzingis has not been there a whole lot, and they've gotten still to be the 5th seed in the Western Conference right now, and that's because of him. It's basically because of his high level of play. Think about and he's had clutch performances. Look at the game against Brooklyn. Look at the game against the Knicks at New York. Look at the Clippers series last year. The guy has gotten better every year, and he gets double teamed and trapped all the time, and he still figures out ways to do it because he's finding out ways to win without being on a team that has a lot of talent. His second star is never there, right? Devin Booker's there basically every night for Chris Paul. And and Devin Booker's better than Kristaps Porzingis. So the fact that he's doing what he's been able to do, he's definitely the 4th-rated point guard. Now the issue of why, when you look at him, right, the thing is he's carrying his team, right? He's had clutch moments. His team's a 5th seed in the Western Conference. They were 7th last year. He's a guy that's proven in the playoffs that he can at least get it done. Look at his series against the Clippers, right? Multiple 40-point games, multiple big-time performances. This guy's unbelievable. He's only 22 years old, and he's just getting the job done and doing what he has to do to get this team to win. And that's the important thing to take away here, guys, that Luka Doncic is an elite-level guard. He's a top 8 player, I think, in the NBA, and he's just unbelievable at what he can do. He's unbelievable. And he's young still, so he's got a lot of room to grow. And the fact that he's doing all of this already, I think in a couple years he'll be the best player in the NBA. But the reason I don't have him higher on the list, okay. Well, in terms of guys ahead of him, he's just not as proven yet. And I think that the other guys are slightly better shooters, slightly better offensively, and have just proven a little bit more in their point in their career. They've at least proven more in the postseason or won MVPs and stuff like that. So that's why he's not ahead of the guys that I have ahead of him right now on the list. I think he has the most potential to be the best point guard in a few years. I think he could be the best player in the league in a few years. I think he needs to just be more. I think he needs to prove more in the postseason, actually get out of the first round. I think he needs to get better defensively. I think his 3-point shooting needs to improve a little bit, but he's unbelievable. What he can do is crazy. And also remember, the point guards in this league are really good players. Think about it. Russell Westbrook, is averaging a triple-double, who I talked about earlier, is not even on this list. So that tells you how good this point guard list is. So Luka Doncic is an unbelievable player, and I think he's only going to continue to build on his success so far this season. Number 3 on this list, Damian Lillard from the Portland Trailblazers. Portland is 6th in the Western Conference, and they've had to do that basically without a lot of their players being healthy most of the year. CJ McCollum had a broken foot, who was out a long time. Yusuf Nurkic had a knee injury, was out a long time. They had trades where they had to get rid of Gary Trent and now had Norman Powell. And Damian Lillard has been the consistent piece on that, right? He's averaging 28 points a game. He's shooting 37% from three. He's getting double-teamed all game and still putting up huge numbers. He's carrying this team to victories. After losing 6 straight games, he's now gotten this team to beat the Lakers recently. He has head-to-head victories over Luca Doncic that basically give them the advantage if it was a tiebreaker. And he plays elite-level basketball, guys. Like, this is who he is. And what's interesting about him, too, is that he's one of the more clutch players in the league, right? He basically leads the team in almost every category. Points, points, assists, and what's incredible about them, too, is that, by the way he's playing, is that he's doing this basically like carrying this team to victories where they really haven't had any business doing that, right? And what's awesome about it is that he's a guy who's one of the most clutch players in the league, like I said, right? And he understands, and he's been in these positions before where he's had to prove himself multiple times. And you look at the bubble last year, right? They were the 9th seed, and they had to overcome all odds, and they got in the playoffs, right? They beat Memphis out, and that was a lot of times due to his play. And then you look at the fact of just his clutch moment after clutch moment. And he's one of the top guys in the NBA in clutch stats. One of the top guys in the NBA in that. Right? No one else's team's that clutch, but he is. He's one of the most clutch players in the league. And the Blazers are always in the playoffs consistently, right? He's proven in the playoffs too. He beat Paul George basically by his lonesome. He has gone to the Western Conference Finals before. He beat the Rockets on a game winner. I mean, he's beaten James Harden before. So the reason I have him over Doncic is, even Doncic might do it slightly more in terms of getting his guys involved. Damian Lillard's slightly a better scorer, better shooter, and the reason I have him is just that he's more proven at this point. He's a little bit more proven. Luca has done as well as you probably could do this season to get this team to the Dallas to where they're at, but Damian Lillard's won the head-to-head matchups against Luca more often, and also I look at the fact that he's been more proven overall, right? He's been more proven in terms of his play, and as a result of that makes things very difficult for Luca to be better than, because again, he's been more proven. Again, he just beat the Lakers the other night, right? And you look at the recent. Portland's won. Oh man, they've won 7 out of their last 8 games. Right? They beat the Nets. He outplayed Kyrie. Went to the Celtics. He outplayed Kemba Walker. Grizzlies outplayed Ja Morant. Pacers outplayed Karis LeVert. Lakers played as well as Anthony Davis. Spurs, they just won recently, right? So what this guy does, and again, they're only about 1 game back of Dallas in the moment. They have the head-to-head. And again, I look at that more seriously because I say this with all due respect to Luca Doncic. It's just that Damian Lillard's proven more at this point in his career, and he's slightly a better player in the clutch based on statistics because he can shoot the ball better, right? He's just a better player, right? They both get their teammates involved. Luca's a better passer and a better rebounder. Lillard and him are both not great defenders, but you're talking about a guy that can win a game better for you. I would slightly take Lillard over him. Lillard has been one of the more clutch players in the league, and I think he's one of the more underrated, underappreciated players in basketball at this moment in time because of the market he plays in. And that's just my point there, right? Is that he's slightly better than Luca, and that's where I go there. So he's number 3 on the list. Number 2, James Harden. Before James Harden got his hamstring injury, the Brooklyn Nets looked like the team to beat with him, because he was carrying them to victories over the Phoenix Suns by himself, going to Indiana and winning it by himself. He was getting Kyrie Irving and him. They beat the Lakers, right? When Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant played the Lakers without LeBron James, they lost, right? When LeBron James played and when Harden and Kyrie played together, they won. Not saying Harden is not better than Kevin Durant. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that his impact on Brooklyn this year has been astronomical. And the reason why it has is because he's right now with Westbrook, I think, the lead leaguer in assists, I believe. And what's so crazy about it, though, what's crazy about all of this is that before he got hurt, he was the league leader in assists. Him and Russell Westbrook right now are still the only guys averaging over double figures assists. Chris Paul, actually, if it's funny, is third and Luca's fifth. But this is the interesting thing to go by, right? Is that James Harden is averaging about 25 points a game. He was an MVP candidate, and when Brooklyn had him, they had an incredible record, right? Incredible record. And what's awesome about it, he's like I call him, he's the engine for Brooklyn's offense. He basically gets everything going. He gets the guys involved. He gets the guys in the right opportunities. And again, he's been a guy who has won an MVP. He's won a scoring title multiple years. And now he's changed his game, and he's become the best version of himself. And he makes his team a poised championship threat. He's better than Damian Lillard because he's won MVP, and the way he's playing this year has resulted in more wins for Brooklyn. I'm basing this off regular season and also past successes. Right? Damian Lillard is probably better in the playoffs than James Harden is. But James Harden had a better result against the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. And James Harden this year has gotten at least the most out of that Brooklyn team in terms of just being a consistent guy they could go to get the guys involved and get the most out of their game. So with all that being said, he's been MVP, changes, and the fact that he has changed his game for the better is one reason why I look at this Brooklyn team and think with James Harden, they could be really hard to beat because of what he does on a consistent basis, right? And when you're passing the ball like he's passing, when you're getting triple-double after triple-double, right, it makes things really good for your offense because basically he's willing to sacrifice it and do what's needed. And the thing is, he's changed his game from being a shooting guard to a point guard. And he's been really good at passing the ball. He's getting these guys involved. And the fact that he's already has been an elite-level scorer, it's tough to say this guy isn't the second-best point guard. It's really tough to say that. And the fact that Brooklyn is the number one offense in the NBA, and they were that when he was there, shows you exactly the impact he's had on this team. And for them to win a championship, he needs to be there because he gets the guys involved, right? Kevin Durant can score and keep you in games because he's that incredible. But James Harden's the guy who gets guys involved because Kyrie's not really like that. That's why Kyrie's more of a shooting guard now, right? And he gets those role players easy shot after easy shot that can help them win games. So I look at James Harden, and these are all the reasons why he's better than a guy like Damian Lillard and Luca Doncic and Chris Paul. Now, the reason why he's not better than the guy who's first on my list is because he's not as clutch as him. He hasn't won as many MVPs, and he hasn't gotten to an NBA championship, right? And that segues over to who's the number one point guard in the NBA. And that is by far and clearly Stephen Curry. It's not even a debate. Stephen Curry is the best point guard in the NBA. He's leading the NBA in scoring with 31.9 points a game. He's carrying the Warriors to an 8th seed in the Western Conference. He's leading them basically by scoring like 40 points every night in order to do it. Getting double and triple teamed off down screens and off ball screens. And the thing is, he's a champion. He's a three-time champion, 2-time MVP. The Warriors right now I think are 1-7 without him in the lineup. They would be a lottery team without him. The last year when they didn't have him, they were a lottery team. And the thing is, him being the best shooter in the league, being a guy that you can easily run an offense around because he's not ball dominant all the time, and the fact that he can just score at will with no issues, he's the best point guard in the league. He's proven in the playoffs. He's playing the best out of any guy in the regular season this year. He's playing on a team that's superiorly less talented than anyone else on this list, and he's getting the job done anyway, right? Because of what he can do. Like you put him in a play-in game, this guy can score 60 points. It's just the way he is. He's carrying this team to victories and carrying them throughout the entire season. And he's been injured at portions of the season this year. Has not mattered, right? He's going to probably win the scoring title this year unless it's close. Between him and Bradley Beal, but this is what this guy does. He's an incredible player. You look at 5.7 assists. He's 5th in PER, which is just the impact you have on your team, right? And this is what he is, right? He's a guy that knows how to win, and he's been with Steve Kerr for years. He understands what Steve Kerr's offense is about. He understands how to move without the basketball. He's easy to play with. He's a great leader. He's very unselfish. And he's a guy that basically you can put your team around, and it doesn't matter. You're going to still get the best results because he's going to find a way to carry this team to victory. This is by far, in my opinion, his best season of his career. Because this team has no business being an A seed right now. Memphis is more talented. San Antonio is more talented. The Pelicans are more talented. But he's surpassed any of those teams because the Warriors have bought into good defense, and he has dominated games based on his scoring. Dominated games. I mean, you can just look at like in the last couple games for him. He's had like multiple 40-point games, and that's just kind of the thing too. Is that it's just interesting, right? The fact that he's been playing this well this season, right? He's shooting 42.9% from three, 48% from the floor. His win shares are one of the highest in the league. His PER, like I said, is fifth in the NBA. And this is the greatest scoring year he's had of his career. He's just better than anyone else. There's no debate, right? No debate. Well, that's just where I want to go there. That's the point I'm making, is that he has been by far the best player in the entire league this year. Not even close. And that's the point there. He has been unbelievable, and there's no questioning it at all. He's been unbelievable this year, what he's been able to do. And he deserves to be the number one point guard in the NBA. That's going to wrap up our show here. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm Michael Schroeder. Don't forget to like and follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, as well as subscribe to us on the different podcast platforms that you listen to. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever you listen to your podcasts on. Please subscribe to us and give us a 5-star review. We really would appreciate that. Until next time, I'm Michael Schroeder. See you guys soon.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.